Go ahead and open your Bibles up to the book of Numbers. Chapter 16 is where we're going to start from this week. The people of Israel had received the law at Mount Sinai, and then the Lord led them from there towards Canaan. And you'll recall last week we had 12 spies that were sent out, one spy from each of the tribes, and they were to go into the land to see the goodness of the land and to see the people. And nothing that God commanded was it, go find out if you can take the land. That wasn't the issue. See the goodness of the land, which would motivate them, and see the people of the land, which would prepare them, but go take the land. That's the plan. And so 10 of the spies gave a bad report saying we cannot do it. Caleb and Joshua were the only two who gave a good report. End result was that entire generation would be forbidden from entering the land with the exception of Joshua and Caleb. They listened to the 10 spies rather than to the 2. And so they would die in the wilderness. So we're going to have 40 years worth of wandering for that generation to die off. Remember, they've only left Egypt about a year previous to this point. And so we now come into chapters 16 and 17, and really you think with all the complaining that's been going on and God exercising punishment upon them for their complaining, that maybe the people would learn and they'd stop complaining. Not so. Now, remember, we've seen the complaint. We want meat, not manna, and so God gave them quail, and those who yielded to the temptation died. We saw Miriam and Aaron complaining against Moses. Miriam was struck with leprosy. We've seen the 10 spies, and they said, we can't take possession. They died of a plague immediately. And then the rest of the people, they complained, God brought us here to die, and so, okay, you're going to die in the wilderness. And that's just the recent complaint. We've had all kinds of complaints from the beginning. But in chapters 16 and 17, there is more complaining. And this time it comes from among the leaders in the congregation. They challenge Moses and Aaron and the authority that they have. So look at the first 3 verses of chapter 16. It says, Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. These gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, you take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, and every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? So we've got these 3 men. Actually, there's a 4th one that is listed, but he's not dealt with in the same way. On is also listed here, the son of Peleth. But we've got these 3 major leaders who rise up against Aaron and Moses. And so we've got Korah and Dathan and Abiram. And well, who are these people? Korah is actually Aaron and Moses' cousin. He also is a Levite. He's not of the tribe, not of the sons of Aaron, but he is a cousin of Moses not of the. He's not with through Aaron and his descendants. He's through another son of Levi. And then the other 2, these are Reubenites, so the tribe of Reuben. And it's not just the 3 of them. As we saw, On is there, and they have another 250 leaders from among the congregation who speak up as well. And so a whole bunch of them, and they come to Moses, and this is the problem. You take too much upon yourselves. You think that you're the only ones who are holy? You think you're the only ones who can appear before God? All the people are holy. That's their statement. Every one of them. And the Lord is among them. If only that were the case. Do you remember a few chapters back when God said to Moses that he was going to spread his spirit upon some others, upon some of the elders, and they prophesied, but they only prophesied one time and never again. And in fact, some of them, Joshua was concerned because some of them weren't even at the tabernacle when they were prophesying, and he said, Master, stop them. And Moses asked him, are you zealous for me? I wish that all of them had the Spirit and all of them would prophesy. The problem with this generation of God's people is that the majority of them are not holy. They have not set themselves apart to serve God. The majority of them, the Lord is not actually with them because they're not with Him. And so as nice as these claims would be, they have continually complained against the Lord. They have rejected His promise to take them into the land of Canaan, and they've rebelled consistently against His plan. That's not a people who are with the Lord. Now, this particular complaint is more so with Korah than with Dathan and Abiram. They've got another complaint to come. But Korah's primary concern, if you'll take a look at verse 6 and following, you'll see what his concern is. He wants the priesthood. Verse 6, it says, do this. This is Moses speaking back to Korah. Take censers, Korah, and all your company, put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow, and it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. Then Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to Himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation and to serve them, and that He has brought you near to Himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi, with you? And are you now seeking the priesthood also? See, that's his concern. And remember, we talked about from the book of Judges, the young Levite who was taken into Micah's house and became a servant of, or a priest for Micah. He wanted more. He wasn't satisfied with just being a Levite and serving at the tabernacle. He wanted to be the main guy. He wanted to be the priest. That is where Korah and those who, among the Levites who are there with him, that's where they're at, is we want to be the priests. We don't want to have Aaron over us. We don't want to have Aaron's sons over us. We want to be the priests. They wanted more. And so Moses' statement to them, notice their complaint, you take too much upon yourselves to Aaron and Moses. Moses says right back to them, you take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. This isn't God's plan for you to be the priest. You are to be serving in the tabernacle. They would clean up things. They would carry things. No, they had duties that they were to do, but they were not the priests. In Numbers chapter 8 and at verse 19, God says, I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons from among the children of Israel to do the work for the children of Israel in the tabernacle of meeting. That tells the rest of the Levites exactly where they belong. Here is where Aaron and his sons are, and you all are given as a gift. You all serve below them, and they were not happy with this. And so Moses is very clear with them. Let's gather tomorrow and we're going to see. Verse 11, therefore you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron that you complain against him? Let's come together, and your complaint's not against me. It's not against Aaron. It's against the Lord and His plan. Let's deal with it tomorrow. Well, Dathan and Abiram, they're Reubenites. They're not concerned about the priesthood. For them, it was something entirely different. And I've read this text a number of times and never really thought about this, but Moses is certain to let us know that they are of the tribe of Reuben. Reuben was the firstborn son of Jacob. These two are upset over Moses' leadership. They don't care about Aaron. They don't want the priesthood. That's for the Levites. Fine, let them go and do their thing as priests. But these two being sons of Reuben, I wonder if perhaps in their mind leadership should fall to them because they're sons of the eldest of all of the tribal origins, the sons of Jacob. There was certainly open opposition to Moses' leadership, has been for a while. And remember back in chapter 14, it got to the point where they were saying, let us select a leader and we'll return to Egypt. Moses, we reject you. We want a different leader. And I'm sure these two had their hat in the ring in order to take over. And just so we know how serious things were, back in chapter 14, verse 10, it says they took up stones to stone Moses and Aaron and Caleb and Joshua. That's how bad things have gotten inside of the nation. And so these two, sons of Reuben, they are rising up because of Moses and because of his leadership. Verse 12, Moses calls them to come out and meet with him, but they refuse. See, that would be them submitting to Moses' leadership if they were to come. And so they refuse even to come. And so then what we see in verse 13 and 14 is, here's their message. They did send a messenger. Here's what we say to you, Moses. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of the fields and vineyards. Couple of things out of their statement. First of all, it's obvious they're not thankful for the job that Moses has been doing. I suspect they don't know how hard it is to lead Israel. Most people who complain about leadership, haven't been in the position of leadership and don't know the struggles. Moses, back not too many chapters ago, was just sort of ready to give up. Things got that hard for him. But not only that, they're not thankful that he brought them away from Egypt. They actually blame him for bringing them out of Egypt. The first statement here that they make is, it's a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey. Brought us not to a land flowing with milk and honey, but brought us up out of a land. That's a reference to Egypt. You brought us up out of a good land. Egypt was a land flowing with milk and honey. Well, yeah, there was good things in Egypt. But what good is it if you're oppressed and beaten? And if instead of all day enjoying the milk and honey of the land, you're building bricks in order to make monuments and make temples and whatever else it was that the Pharaoh had them making. They blame Moses for that generation not entering Canaan and their imminent death. Not only did you bring us away from a land that flows with milk and honey, Egypt, but you brought us away from there to kill us in the wilderness. Moses isn't doing that. That was very simple. All they had to do was agree, okay, let's go into the land, we can take it, and they wouldn't be dying in the wilderness. They're the ones who rejected God's plan and wanted to do things their own way. Well, God allowed it. You want to die in the wilderness? You can die in the wilderness. I'll take the next generation in. The inheritance was there. The fact is they refused to step up and take it. That's not Moses' fault. Why is it that you should keep acting like a prince over us? You remember back in Exodus chapter 2, before Moses fled Egypt, he went out to see his people, the children of Israel. He saw an Egyptian who was beating an Israelite, and he stepped in. And in the process, he killed the Egyptian. Tried to hide that. Hopefully nobody saw that. Next day, he sees two of the Hebrews fighting each other, and he steps in and says, "Don't fight your brethren." You remember they said, "What, are you going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian yesterday? Who made you a prince over us?" Exodus 2, verse 14. That thought has been resonating in the minds of several for a year plus at this point. Why is he leading us? Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Jump over to the book of Acts, if you would, for a moment. Chapter 7. Acts 7 is where Stephen gives us a history of Israel. Between verse 35 and verse 39, he talks about Moses. He says, "This Moses, whom they rejected, saying, 'Who made you a ruler and a judge?' is the one God sent to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He brought them out after he had shown wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years. This is that Moses who said to the children of Israel, 'The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear. This is he who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai and with our fathers, the one who received the living oracles to give to us, whom our fathers would not obey, but rejected. And in their hearts they turned back to Egypt.' Who made you a ruler or a prince over us? God did. If it weren't for God sending Moses, they'd still be building bricks. That's what they would be doing for a living. Instead, they had the opportunity to come in and to possess land. Understand the difference here. What God was offering them is you can go and be landowners and dwell in the land and live off the value of the land, whereas in Egypt, they weren't landowners, they were actually possessions themselves. They were slaves. This lack of respect for Moses came right from the beginning. Moses is angry. It says Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, "Do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them." They have accused him of incompetence. "Moses, it's your fault that we're dying off in the wilderness." Not only that, they have accused him of not having the nation's best interest in view. "You should have just left us alone. We were better off where we were." And they've accused him of lording it over the people in this phrase, "Why are you acting like a prince over us?" What do princes commonly do? They live the life of luxury when their people do not. And that's why he makes the statement, "I'm not taking one donkey from among them. One of the lowest of the animals, I'm not even taking one of those from these people." He's given himself over and over to them, and they do not appreciate it. So Moses turns his attention back to Korah. These two, they won't even come up and talk to him in person. So he turns his attention back to Korah in verse 16 and 17. So let's go back. Numbers 16, verse 16. Moses said to Korah, tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they, as well as Aaron. Let each take his censer and put incense in it. Each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer. So we're going to appear before the Lord, and we're going to find out. We'll ask God who he wants to be priest. Now, God's already decided this and appointed it and spoken about it. It's Aaron. But there's some confusion among Korah and those who were with him. And so, just so we can know for sure, let's go and find out. So the next day, Korah and the 250 who appeared with him did as Moses instructed. They come and they've got their censer and they put incense in it and they put fire, and we're going to find out whether God chooses this Aaron guy or if that was just Moses who put him in place. Here is God's response to what he sees in front of the tabernacle. Verse 21. To Aaron and Moses, he says, separate yourselves from among this congregation that I may consume them in a moment. We've seen this before. How many times? I've not been counting. But there have been several times where the Lord is just ready to end it all with the nation and restart with Moses. Because Moses is faithful. And it's hard to say of the rest of these that they're faithful. And so he's ready to destroy all. This is not just Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and the 250. This is the entire congregation that he's talking about. Because they're there too to find out, well, okay, is it Moses or is it Aaron? Or you know, they're even questioning what God has already said. These folks are just the vocal remnant of a larger problem. And don't you know how easy it would be for Moses at this point to say, yeah, okay, I will step away from these people and you go ahead and destroy them and we'll start over later. But this is what Moses said. Shall one man sin and you be angry with all the congregation? Now, Moses is not saying that the rest of the people haven't been engaged in this in some way. But there's a ringleader in this whole deal. And if Korah were not leading the charge, there would be no charge here. And so let's deal with Korah. And then hopefully we can deal with the hearts of the rest of the people afterward. But let's deal with Korah. Again, as frustrated as Moses is with the people, he takes up their cause once more. And so God will destroy not all the nation, but those who were the ringleaders. Verse 23. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. All right, I'll not take out the entire congregation. We'll deal with the ringleaders. And it says in verse 26, don't even touch anything of theirs, lest you be consumed in their sins. You don't want any part to do with these guys. And so the people very quickly get away from them, except for their families. And I think this demonstrates what Moses was saying to the Lord, is that they're a bunch of followers. That's what they are. You know, there are some ringleaders in all this, but then the rest of them are just following whichever way the flow is going. And so they all depart very quickly from Korah and those who were with him. And then Moses made a proclamation against Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Remember, Dathan and Abiram they haven't come out. They're not interested in coming and talking to Moses. We don't acknowledge your authority is basically the idea. But here's what he makes as a declaration, verse 28 through 30. By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works. That's part of the question. That's Dathan and Abiram's contention, is that who made you a prince? By this you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. Interesting, Jesus had to make the same kind of declaration over and over in John's Gospel. He was accused of taking authority that was not his. They kept asking him, by what authority do you do these things? And he kept turning their attention back to the one who sent him. I do not speak of my own authority, but he who sent me, I speak as he has shown me. Moses said the same thing. If these men die naturally, like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. That makes it pretty easy. If you see something that has never happened before, basically, the earth is going to open up like it's opening its mouth, and it's going to swallow them, and then it's going to close up afterward. There's no way Moses can create that. That would have to come from God. But think about the statements that he's making here. I want you to know that the Lord has sent me to do this. This is not me doing my own will. Moses didn't want authority. Remember when God called him at the burning bush? And he tried to excuse himself. Well, when I come to the people, what am I supposed to say to them? Who sent me? Well, I'm not that skilled of a speaker. What if they don't believe me? All kinds of reasons why he shouldn't be the one to go. And then finally he just said, send somebody else. He did not want to go. And so, this is all God's doing. This is not Moses trying to become the authority. This is because God made him the leader. And he has led them from captivity and led them to the doorstep of the promised land. And yet they don't respect him. He just simply was fulfilling the role that God gave him. If you see something that has not happened before, then you will know. Well, verse 31. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the men with Korah with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. It doesn't say 2 months later, as soon as Moses finished saying it, it happened. This was something new. The earth opens up, it swallows them, it closes up, they're not there anymore. Their tents are gone, their possessions are gone, the entire family is gone. Verse 34, then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. Were you not listening? This wasn't for everybody. This was for Korah and Dathan and Abiram and those who were with them. Verse 34, the fear response that they had, that this might be their fate as well. No, God was showing you who the leader of the nation is. In verse 35, God's not done yet. And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. Yes, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram were the primary leaders, but there were some other leaders who they took part as well. And so God will remove their influence from the nation. 36 through 41, Eleazar, who is Aaron's son, is told, gather up all of the censers out of the fire. There's fire around here because God consumed them with fire, all 250. But gather up the censers because they're holy. They were brought before the Lord for service. And so we need to use them correctly. They're presented before the Lord. And so what he's to do with them then is they are to be hammered into a bronze covering for the altar. And that would serve as a memorial, as a reminder of who is supposed to serve at the altar. It would remind them that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord. This is what happened to those who did. They were consumed, and their censers are no more. So you would think that the grumbling and complaining would be done, right? I would hope so. There's been a consistent pattern: grumble and complain, God judges, right? And so it ought to be done. The Lord has shown unequivocally that he supports Aaron as his priest, high priest, and his sons as priests, that Moses is the leader of the nation. But, verse 41, on the next day, after all this took place, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." It's okay to just shake your head at that. You have killed the people. No, they didn't. It was the Lord who opened up the earth and consumed Korah and Dathan and Abiram. It was the Lord who sent fire out of heaven to consume the 250 who unlawfully served before the Lord with incense. And now they're blaming Aaron and Moses. And so verse 42 through verse 45, the people came up against Aaron and Moses. Again, the picture is that they have surrounded them. And Aaron and Moses, they turn toward the tabernacle of meeting. The Lord tells Aaron and Moses, get away from the people. I'm going to consume them in a moment. We were there yesterday. Anyone else on board with consuming the entire nation? I think I would have been. Okay, Lord. But look at Moses' response in verse 46. Moses said to Aaron, take a censer and put fire in it from the altar, put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord, the plague has begun. You talk about a good leader. There's been chance after chance after chance where Moses could have allowed the Lord to destroy the entire nation and restart with him. Think about the glory involved in that. Moses, you're the new Jacob. That's essentially what it would be. And yet, he defends the people. Anyone here willing to go make atonement for the people in this circumstance? I think most are ready. Just let them die because of their wickedness. But look at verse 47 and following. Then Aaron took it as Moses commanded and ran into the midst of the assembly. Talk about some bravery on Aaron's part. There's a plague going on among the people. But he runs out into the midst of all this. The plague already begun among them. So he put in the incense and made atonement for the people, and he stood between the dead and the living, so the plague was stopped. Now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incident. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, for the plague had stopped. 14,700 people, because they complained against Moses and Aaron a day after God made it clear they're the leaders. Again, it's not a rejection of Moses and Aaron as much as it's a rejection of God, because God had made it clear. Chapter 17. The Lord plans to set all this complaining aside. And so he devises a plan, has Moses share it with the people. We're going to collect 12 rods. We're going to have one rod from the leader of each of the tribes of Israel. And they're going to write their name on it. We want to know who each rod belongs to. So write your names on that. And then we're going to write Aaron's name on another rod. That would be the 13th rod. And then we're just going to go and take these before the Lord. He says, verse 4 and 5, you shall place them in the tabernacle of meeting before the testimony where I meet with you, and it shall be that the rod of the man whom I choose will blossom. Thus I will rid myself of the complaints of the children of Israel, which they make against you. Apparently, the previous day's activities didn't settle it for the people of Israel. So we're going to try it again. Verse 6 and 7, they do as the Lord had commanded. They bring the rods. There's 13 rods with names on them. They're set in the tabernacle of meeting. And look at verse 8. Now it came to pass on the next day that Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds, had produced blossoms, and yielded ripe almonds. We're just going to see which one blossoms. Sprouted, put forth buds, produced blossoms, and yielded ripe almonds. You think God's trying to send a message here? It's this one, right? Aaron's rod is the one that did this. You know what happened to the rest of them? They all got the rods back. Here you go. Got your name on it now. But that's it. And so verse 10, the Lord said to Moses, bring Aaron's rod back before the testimony, to keep it as a sign against the rebels, that you may put their complaints away from me, lest they die. So we've got a cover over the altar built out of the bronze from the censers of those who rebelled, and that's a memorial. And now we've got Aaron's rod, which has budded and blossomed, and that's a memorial. We need to stop the complaining. We need to get the people to cease. Verses 11, Moses did as the Lord commanded him. Look at 12 and 13. So the children of Israel spoke to Moses, saying, surely we die, we perish, we all perish. Whoever even comes near the tabernacle of the Lord must die. Shall we all utterly die? Is this a new complaint? It certainly could be. It could also be a realization on their part that their rebellion brings about judgment. Maybe they're learning that if we rebel against the Lord and his will, then it brings death. Korah, Dathan, Abiram, they're all dead. The 250, they're dead. 17,000 or 14,700 from yesterday are dead. But what this demonstrates is that people are often prone to extremes. When Korah came to Moses, it was everybody is holy and everybody can serve at the tabernacle. That's an extreme. That is not God's will. Does God want everybody to be holy? Yes. Does that mean that everybody gets to serve at the tabernacle? No. That was an extreme position. And I believe that what we end this text with is the alternate extreme. We can't even come near the tabernacle. No, who said that? That's not what the Lord was saying. The Lord is saying you need to acknowledge the leadership of Moses over the nation. You need to acknowledge the leadership of Aaron among the priests and over the spiritual activities. And then come before the tabernacle to worship the Lord properly. But unfortunately, folks tend to gravitate towards extremes if they're not really focused on the will of God. All right, some lessons out of the text for us today. First thing is respect those who are leaders. This was an ongoing problem in Israel. Certainly in the days of Moses, that's what we've seen here and will continue to see. But the same spirit of rebellion was among God's people at other times in their history as well. Rejection of the judge system. Now, when the judges were there and were in the midst of the judge system, they liked them, and because they were saving them from their enemies. But you get towards the end, where the falling apart of the judge system, they complain against Samuel, and because of his sons, they don't want that. And so, give us a king like the nations around us. We don't like God's plan anymore. They rejected their leaders. During the time of David, there was civil war. His own son rose up against him. And then the mistreatment of the prophets who warned the people over and over. They came for their benefit, and yet they mistreated the prophets. It continued to be a problem even into the New Testament. Jesus' authority was questioned time and again by the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees, despite him demonstrating that he came from above. How many miracles does he have to do for them to realize that he comes from God? Paul, he had to defend his apostleship. We see that in the book of Galatians. We see that through the Corinthian letters. There's people who doubted his apostleship. They were not respecting him as a leader among them. The whole Gnostic movement that we've talked about, it urged people to ignore the apostles and listen to us instead. There are warnings in the New Testament about heeding the voice of those who are appointed as leaders in the local church. Talking about elders over in Hebrews chapter 13. In the absence of elders, we need to be sure that we do things decently and in order. That none of us become a law unto ourselves, that none of us take authority, undue authority to ourselves. We need to be working together towards having the right kind of leadership. That's sort of where we're at, is we need to work together towards having the right leadership. But we need to have respect for God's authority and for those who have been given authority to do things in the kingdom of God. Beware of the wrath of God. The Lord had been exceptionally patient with these people. There was a lot of things where he just didn't do anything in response. He didn't lash out. He didn't destroy. But in recent chapters, they had worn out his patience. And so at this point, all in that generation who came out of Egypt are doomed to die. And so, but that said, they don't need to die in rebellion. They're choosing to do that. They could mend their ways. They could serve the Lord. Unfortunately, most would not. Well, we don't want to see the wrath of God exercised against us. You come into the New Testament, you don't see it quite the same as what we see it here in Numbers. But remember Acts chapter 5, Ananias and Sapphira? God used them as an example. He is the same God today that he was under the Old Testament. God didn't change. The covenant changed. God did not. And so he made an example of them. They sinned, they died. The wages of sin is death. And so he didn't give them another chance. I will say of that God knows the hearts of people. If they were of a mind to repent, then he may have allowed that to be so. He didn't give them a chance. They became an example. We need to walk God's way. We need to be careful about our manner of life. We don't want to meet the wrath of God, neither in this life nor in eternity. And then finally, God knows how to make his will clear. And he did. Through our text here, he made his will clear. Korah or Aaron, the Lord's choice was clear. Dathan and Abiram or Moses, the Lord's choice was clear. The fact is, the people rejected what God was saying. Chapter 17, the 12 tribal leaders or Aaron. Again, the Lord made his choice clear. He still does that. You and I can pick up the scriptures, we can read and understand what it says. You know, I am thoroughly convinced that it takes help to misunderstand most things in the Bible. That if somebody who has no influence whatsoever picks up things in the scriptures, they're going to understand what they're reading. Because God made it that way. He made it so that it is understandable. And so people need to read the Bible with a desire to find out what God's will is. Sadly, too many read the Bible with a view of trying to support their own doctrine or belief. And if we read it that way, we're going to end up finding what we're looking for. Folks can twist and turn Scripture to make it say all kinds of things. And so we need to remove bias and just simply read the text for what it says and let it mean what it says.